Joe Biden has become the first sitting U.S. president to visit the site of the Tulsa Massacre in Oklahoma. He marked 100 years since dozens or possibly hundreds of African Americans were killed by a white mob. Biden says that rights for Black Americans are still under assault to this day.
These survivors of the Tulsa Massacre are over 100 years old, but never in their long life have they seen a president commemorate the event. President Biden held a minute of silence in Tulsa to remember a Black community that was subjected to one of the worst racial attacks in U.S. history.
For much too long, the history of what took place here was told in silence, cloaked in darkness. But just because history is silent, it doesn't mean that it did not take place.
In 1921, a mob of white people looted and burned Tulsa's thriving Greenwood district. A proper count of the dead was never completed, but some estimates say hundreds of Black Americans were killed. Those now living in the city say the president's visit was vital for racial justice.
And it's important because there's a beginning of admittance. There's a beginning of let's speak on these things and let's try to deal with this so that we can grow and move forward.
We need his presence. We need for people to continue to learn about the race massacre and to continue to invest to really help us move forward.
Well, looking back is one thing, but thinking about what's next is sort of the big part of it. Like, what are we going to do to make things right? What are we going to do to improve our community?
Biden has steered clear of a commitment for reparations to survivors and their descendants, but says his administration is aware that more needs to be done to address racial inequalities.
And for more, let's bring in DW reporter Stacey Bivens joining us here in the studio. Stacey, 100 years it took a U.S. president sitting U.S. president, to visit the site of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Is it finally getting the attention that it deserves now?
Yes, finally, slowly. A lot of people would say too slowly. And I don't need to tell you that there are many Americans who had never heard about this thriving community, Greenwood, that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. African-American doctors, lawyers, it had hospitals, schools, all the things you need to make a community a home. And over 2 days, an angry white mob destroyed everything. It was 35 blocks. Everything was destroyed. Hundreds of people were missing. More were dead. And they just unearthed a mass grave site that they've begun excavating now. But this story is so important because it highlights the wealth gap between Black and white, which is what President Biden was talking about. It's impossible to pass on generational wealth when you're not allowed to build, you're not allowed to live, and you're not allowed to thrive. And that's the problem. It also highlights a form of systematic racism. A lot of people say it doesn't exist. Well, during this time in Greenwood, firefighters didn't come to fight the fire. Police didn't arrest anybody. And even the media focused on the 3 dead white people and not the hundreds of Black people who were dead or missing. And so that's why this is so important. Greenwood is just one area that was attacked by angry white mobs between, the end of the Civil War in 1940, 100 such attacks. So it's important to know America's true history.
It's not isolated, certainly. You talked a little bit about this concept of generational wealth now. What always comes up there is, of course, reparations.
Sure.
Financially speaking. Biden had something to say about that, but he fell short of a commitment, didn't he? So just walk us through what's at play.
Right. Well, he talked about what a lot of Black Americans talk about, acknowledgement. How can you heal if your plight wasn't acknowledged? And how can white America rethink its relationship with its fellow Americans if it doesn't know the truth of its history? So that was an important thing. And just an aside, we spoke about this earlier. When I came to Germany, I was really impressed by the fact that there are these markers all over the city to let you know where Jewish people were kidnapped and that they were killed. And there's memorials and there's talks about it in language school. And it's something that the United States has been very slow to do. So before you can even talk about reparations, you have to talk about the fact that this happened. It would be great if the people of Greenwood, those people who are more than 100 years old that were in our piece, if they they were given reparations, if the victims' descendants were given reparations. Of course, Biden, as you said, did not talk about that. But he did link the Black racial wealth gap with his economic plan, which would focus a lot of government money, contractors, for example, towards Black neighborhoods. And that's a start.
DW's Stacey Bivens breaking it all down for us on this somber anniversary, we have to say.
Yeah.
Stacey, thank you so much.
You're welcome.